subsistence uses. As I showed briefly in the in my presentation, we have to obviously relate a lot of our work, do a lot of our work in conjunction with the authorities. In Peru, and I'm guessing in a lot of the countries where you all are, there are different authorities in charge of different things. So depending on what the case is or what you're trying to achieve, you have to speak to a different authority and maybe even liaise between several, or they have to liaise between themselves. And that can cause difficulty. Another thing we have a problem here is apathy on the part of the authorities. Quite often they think, you know, it's just a monkey. It's not important. They're more interested in the illegal gold mining or the illegal timber and so on. These may be common issues that you all face over there. I'm going to stop my introduction now and let you all introduce yourselves. And then we can get into the proper discussion. So I'm just going to go in the order of how your little windows are on my screen. So we'll start with Dave Neal. If you could introduce yourself and the work you do as briefly as possible.
Thanks, Sam. I'm Dave. I'm the Animal Welfare Director at Animals Asia Foundation, and I oversee a team of people working in Vietnam on a whole variety of issues. And if you listen to Tang's conversation and presentation, then you'll have heard some of the issues that we're working on. But in terms of macaques, then most of our work is on welfare improvements for rescued macaques once they come into government rescue centres. But obviously, we're also very interested in trying to contribute to tackling that illegal wildlife trade in Vietnam as well.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Now, Fiolita, hope I'm pronouncing everyone's names right. I think your microphone might be on mute, can't hear you. Still nothing.
It sounds very staticky, so maybe there's a connection problem.
Yeah, it might be an issue with your headphone microphone set. Just interference still. I'll give you time to try and fix that problem, and we'll pass on to the next person and come back to you in a minute. Okay. So now, Charlene.
Hey, hi everyone.
Hi everyone. My name is
Hello.
Hi, Fiolita.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's working now.
Okay. Okay. Sorry for the technical problem. Okay. Yeah, my name is Fiolita from Indonesia. Now I'm working with Animals Don't Speak Human, an organization that I built with my friend. And currently we are working to do raise awareness to the public about the importance of protecting habitat, and also educating them about the mistake and how dangerous it will be to keep macaque as pet, because this is like a big issue in Indonesia. And also we assist many animal protection NGO here in Indonesia to helping them drafting legal opinion or advice regarding problem faced by NGO related to macaques. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Charlene, back to you.
Hey, hi everyone. My name is Shalene. So I'm from the wildlife management team in ACUS. So I'm from Singapore. So for my team, what we do is We usually get calls and emails from residents regarding macaque encounters, macaque interactions. What we do is we try to educate them on what to do, what not to do when we have this kind of encounters, depending on the situation. So we also take on projects to promote human-wildlife coexistence in Singapore, which is very prevalent because as you heard from Sabrina just now, there are a lot of developments in Singapore, and a lot of our urban spaces are right next to green spaces.
Okay, thanks. On to Ryan now.
Thanks, Sam. Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan. I also work for Animals Asia Foundation. So I'm one of Dave's team that he mentioned earlier. My specific role is actually an elephant welfare advisor. However, the national park in Vietnam that I'm mostly attached to also has a small rescue center with 8 macaques, 3 different species, subspecies of macaque. It's a fairly static environment at the moment, insofar as we don't have an influx of, rescued animals or seized from the animal trade. However, it looks likely that one or more government organisations in the area are going to expand their rescue centre. And so there's a lot of potential, I think, for us to be receiving a lot more animals in the future.
Okay, now Adinda. Your microphone is muted.
Well, hello, greeting everyone. Okay, my name is Dinda and I'm from Climate Research Center IPB University in Bogor, Indonesia. And our facilities conduct facilities for the researcher to do a research in our facilities. And it includes to educate educate and then to do breeding. We have a colony breeding of Macaque nemasina and Macaque fascicularis in our facilities. Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Now Gunung.
Hi everyone. My name is Isi Gununggea. I have a long experience with orangutan conservation, but with macaque, this is a new challenge for me. I'm now working to help establishment of macaque rescue center in Sumatra, and the project is still ongoing. It's not operational yet, but we have completed the constructions of quarantine and facilities, but other constructions are still ongoing. So we are going to start operation next year.
Okay, good luck with that. Jeremy now.
Sorry, I had to run home to get a battery. Our power went out here. But yeah, my name is Jeremy. I'm the director of the Laos Conservation Trust for Wildlife. We're a rescue, rehab, and release center. We rescue all taxa from any animal group. We currently have about 100 macaques at our center, and we have not started any release programs with them. So yeah, just trying to network with more people. Attended the first one, really happy with everything going on. So just hoping to kind of grow our base and get more information from what other people are doing, and hopefully come up with some nice guidelines and more information. So yeah, thank you.
Great. Now Camille.
Hi, everyone. I'm Camille. It's lunchtime here in Manila. Very happy to be here, and I'm one of the co-founders of Communitail. So it's a social enterprise that we created with some of my animal-loving friends, and we focus on mainly on animal-assisted intervention. So we do dog visits on to different schools. We conduct trainings also. Mostly our goal is to improve, to help promote the human-animal bond. And in relation to macaques, actually, this is one of our side projects. I'm a volunteer in one of the, because of the pandemic, one of the eco parks. It's located in Antipolo, near the mountain. So one of the eco parks there, they have, I think, seven. When we visited, they had seven long-tailed macaques. And the main issue there is that the funding stopped. So there's lack of food. There's only, I think, two people. They're only rotating during the day, so no one checks on the animals at night. Aside from macaques, there are also other animals there. And also, one of our problems also would be there has been no health checkups for the animals there. So right now, I'm volunteering there. We are helping out. It's a foundation actually, but some of the animals were donated actually by the government because we don't have space here. I think the conservation here for macaques is still growing. Admittedly, I'm very humbled to be surrounded by experts. I'm not really an expert. I'm a volunteer. So I'm very happy and I hope to learn more so that we can contribute and help the macaques living in the eco park. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And don't worry, I think a lot of us probably started as volunteers as well. Passing on now to Cook Fung. Did I say that right?
Yes, my name is Cook. Everyone can call me Cook. I am Cook from Animals Asia too. Yeah, there are a lot of people from Animals Asia here. So now I am supporting a macaque project where has about 30 macaques with 5 species in a rescue center from Vietnam. So we are continue to improve the macaque welfare at this facility where we do everything for such as doing enrichment or doing some health check for animal for macaques. Yeah, that's all. And I am very happy to be here to learn more about macaques. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Now, Harold.
Hello, I'm Harold. I work for Animals Asia. I'm a note taker in this workshop, so I will be furiously writing, which is why I have my camera off, because you don't need to see me type. For my work, I work in Vietnam in government-run rescue centres, and I have done for the last 7 years. My work within these rescue centres focuses on everything. So I've helped with the drafting of laws in Vietnam for the confiscation. I've helped with the identification of species for the Forest Protection Department and other authorities. I design facilities for the government rescue centres. I take care of designing their husbandry and protocols. And then I do this for a number of centres within Vietnam. In terms of the numbers of macaques across the centres I work with, probably on average, we take about 400 macaques a year, somewhere around there. And then a majority of them are released on welfare grounds rather than conservation grounds. But yeah, I'm basically involved in any macaque thing from any government rescue centre in Vietnam.
Okay, as long as it doesn't interfere with your note taking and if it's allowed, I think you're welcome to join the discussion as well at any point.
Cool, thank you. I will do. I'll try not to be totally silent. It depends if I can type and talk.
Yeah. So I think that's everyone. The screen shifted around a bit during it, but I think everyone's had their chance to introduce themselves. I'm assuming outside of just the Animals Asia team, some of you know each other or have communicated through work, or you're all meeting each other for the first time as well.
We've just been joined by one further person, Saeed. Welcome, Saeed.
Hi, Saeed. If you want, we've all just introduced ourselves. You can take 30 seconds to introduce yourself and the work you do.
Hello, can you hear me or not?
Yep,
yeah.
Can hear you good.
Okay, cool. So basically, well, my name is Saeed Shafi'i Sabet. I'm a behavioral, I do behavioral research on fish and underwater environments. So I'm more interested to see how anthropogenic sound may affect the fish and invertebrates behavior in terms of predator-prey interactions, foraging performance, and also spatial distribution. I received my PhD at Leiden University in the Netherlands, and now I'm doing my postdoctoral research fellow at University of Gilan in Iran. So this is just brief overview, but yeah, I'm really interested to extend my knowledge. So also on the primates and also how they behave, and yeah, so that's just a quick review of myself.
Okay, great. Thanks. So yeah, as I was saying, I assume some of you know each other, have communicated through work, or you're all also meeting for the first time. Just raise your hand at the camera or whatever if you do know someone else here other than the Animals Asia group.
I can just say I'm the guy who's helping Gunung with his sanctuary in North Sumatra. So I'm the one designing that and doing the protocols. The Animals Asia ones, obviously, I know them all already.
Okay, so I thought some of you at least would have known each other or communicated previously, seeing as you're working in similar fields.
Well, I'm gonna just pop in and say, even though I'm not officially here, I'm just popping in and out. I have communicated with several others of you regarding your projects over time, so it's not complete. It's like Jeremy, for example, you were here for the last thing, so it's sort of the community is growing a little bit as we move.
Okay. So yeah, we've got a good mix of countries and mix of specialties. Quite a lot of rescue centers, breeding centers, captive management, welfare, education, some research, legal advice as well. We're going to focus on the work with authorities. And something which struck me, as we're quite rescue center heavy here, or at least captive setting heavy here, what we have in Peru is, and in South America in general, from my experience, is a general lack of rescue centers. Most countries in Latin America don't have government-funded rescue centers. They're all private entities and they have to fund themselves. And then you get on top of that a difficulty of where the authorities come necessarily to make sure that welfare conditions are being met, that laws aren't being broken, that rescue centers are actually rescue centers. So I'd be interested, like across the board here, what kind of interaction do the rescue centers? Are they all government rescue centers where you work? I don't think so. I think Animals Asia have their own one. What kind of interaction do you have with the government authorities? Are they helpful? I know Camille, I think, mentioned funding is difficult to get at her site. What kind of interactions are there with the authorities for the rescue centers? If anyone wants to let me know.
I can start if no one else is going to, reluctantly. So I work in the government-run rescue centres, and the reason why I station myself in government-run rescue centres is so that things like budget aren't a problem, because I intended to make the illegal wildlife trade a government problem. So within the government centres, the interactions with the authorities are very simple and very easy, because it's all intergovernment, so confiscations come from government departments. I also work with NGOs, and in Vietnam you get hybrid rescue centres, which are half NGO, half government, which facilitates the work a bit easier, but there's normally a wrestle for control of the rescue centre between those two parties. So that can lead to difficulties. Then when you get rescue centres, NGO rescue centres that function on their own without that government partnership, you do get a lot of government authorities that don't like dealing with NGOs and see them as a external interference. So you'll get bears transferred to, or any animal, sorry, transferred to rescue centres that can't handle them just because they don't want to go to an NGO. So there is a little bit of a divide. And then it gets more complicated with local NGOs registration versus international NGO registration.
Anyone else have similar experience or different experience? Fiolita?
Can you hear me before I speak?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just want to share a little bit about the condition in Indonesia. Actually, it's quite same with Peru. Normally, when the government want to do confiscate, they mostly the NGO working with the forest ministry, which is the anything which related to macaques is under forestry ministry. But when it comes to macaques or any primates which not regulated or which not protected by the law, mostly they doesn't want to do any want to help to do more, because yeah, it's not regulated by the law, and also it's not really important, and they assume that many macaques is in the forest, so they not really like taking the report really serious. But when it comes to protected primates, normally they will help the NGO, but also the same problem, that they don't have any rescue center. Mostly they offer it to other NGO who has a rescue center, but not give any. I don't know exactly about the support that they give. Mostly they just give the permit, but about the funding they will not do that. And also it's quite hard for the rescue center from the NGO that to rehabilitate and release them into forest, because it has to connect it to the forest ministry. Yeah, I think that's all. Thank you.
Fiolita, lower your hand, just so everyone knows when, after you've raised your hand, you need to lower it, so I don't think you're speaking. Jeremy has raised his hand, first one I saw.
Yeah, so I'll speak a little bit to the situation here in Laos. It sounds like it's a little bit similar to Peru. So there aren't any government-run rescue centers here in the country. It's only ours and then Free the Bears. Obviously, Free the Bears focuses mainly on bears, but they do have a new sanctuary where they are accepting other species as well. But for the most part, we will accept all the other species, and then usually we'll give our bears, or tell them if there's a bear tip off and give it to them. So LCTW, our organization, we run the Rescue Hotline here in the country. It's new. We only started it about 1.5 years ago. So it's a 4-digit number, just like regular hotlines. And then we gather all that information. We then report it to the Department of Forestry inspection. From there, hopefully they take initiative and confiscate the animal. It sounds like our statistics are similar to yours were in your presentation, Sam. There's not much initiative to go out there and do it. And we also completely fund all of the trips. So we fund, you know, the petrol, the per diem, their accommodations. We pay for all of that for the government to actually go out and get the animal. So there's really not a big reason why they shouldn't do it. And we haven't really been able to get the answer on why that doesn't happen. And this is obviously not just for macaques, this is any other species that we report to them. We had a little bit of, I would say, disagreement from one of the people that work in the Department of Forestry Inspection about us running the hotline. But we had the support from their superiors, and they actually believe that it's, you know, it's good that we run it and that we're helping them. And we've always framed it in a very positive light, that we are here to support them, right? So we get all the information, we just collect it, and we can't do anything without them. So obviously we just give them all of the information, and if they take action, they take action. If they don't, we do try to follow up on the cases and see what the reason was, or we just ask them, hey, is there anything we can do to help you? A lot of times we get no response, or they just don't want to. So what we're trying to do, and what my kind of goal is to collect all this data. So there's also never been a database of all these reports really collected and actually looked through and followed up and everything. So that's where, with this project, with our hotline and our EU grant, that's kind of what's funding it. That's where we've been able to start this database, collect all this information, write down how often we follow up, write down who we're reporting it to, all of that type of stuff. And then my goal is this next year to present this information to the DG, the Deputy General of the Department of Forestry Inspection, and hope that these statistics can kind of show them, oh, we're not accomplishing as much as we should be, or something. That may be a little optimistic, but that's kind of the goal here. The situation in terms of confiscations, it's not great. But there's not really government funding for anything. NGOs have a very large presence here in Laos. I'd say most programs are funded by NGOs. And that's not just to do with animals, but do with a lot of other areas as well. So that's a little bit of our situation here.
Just quickly before passing on, I've got a question. In Laos, are macaques protected species? Jeremy? Oh, well, he's frozen. Okay. It's just that it was mentioned earlier that the protected species, I think in Indonesia, it's more likely that there's a rescue or an intervention, but with the macaques, they're not a protected species, so it's much less likely. That's similar in Peru, although theoretically all wildlife is protected, but the threatened species are obviously given a higher priority by the authorities. Charlene, you have your hand up for a while now.
I can give the overview of the situation in Singapore. So the kind of interactions we have with authorities. So as ACAS, we are an animal welfare NGO. So our funding is really from donors, and we're always trying to do fundraisers to get more funds. So funding is always an issue. So we are also a small wildlife rescue center, and it's a rehab area that we have. And we have close working relations with the government. So in terms of wildlife management, so we both have our own hotlines, and we work together on education. So we're all in the Macaque working group in Singapore. So in terms of crime cases, both of us also have our own hotlines. We do our own, for cases that get passed to us, so we do our own investigations, and then if needed, we'll file a report with the governmental organizations that hand over cases to them. So for law enforcement, it's all on the government side, so the NGO doesn't do anything with it. For Singapore, especially online trade is a very serious issue here. So NGOs like WWF, we actually work together with the government, they have this program called the Cyber Spotters, where they also get volunteers. So volunteers from the public to actually spot all these listings on, for example, Carousel. And sometimes a lot of them also comes from phone applications like your Telegram and WhatsApp. Yeah, so yes, this is the situation in Singapore.
Okay, Gunung, you're next.
Okay, thank you. Well, in North Sumatra province, where we are establishing a new macaque rescue center, the government support for macaque conservation is still improving. We have government rescue center in North Sumatra, but it is for all species, various species, especially the protected species. Macaque and long-tailed macaque and pig-tailed macaque, unfortunately not protected yet. So very little attention to this animal. So it will be the first rescue center in North Sumatra, the one that we are working on. And here, the macaques are assumed as pests. People love to kill them because they destroy crops of local community. And there is no problem with them if they kill the macaques because it's not protected. So people love to kill it, and they have a kind of feeling of hero if they kill the macaques because they assume that they are helping other people. They protect the plantation and so on. So that is something that we want to change. And also, many people think that we have too many macaques, but no survey yet. We don't have exact, estimate of number of population yet. So I'm worried that it's now not as many people think, because killing of macaques continue. And we have one macaque in our office now with 7 pellets in his body. So we don't know yet what we are going to do, but we probably will have a kind of surgery to get the pellets out because people shoot him with air rifle, and it happened many times, but this one is given to us by the wildlife authority in North Sumatra to care for. So that will be probably the best animal that will go to the rescue center early next year. And I think in the future we still need awareness activity works to change their perceptions, and we also need a kind of regulations to give protection to these animals, and that's my comment at this point.
Sorry, unmute myself. There's a really good parallel which I've seen for years between macaques and capuchins in South America. They're kind of similar all-round generalist species. They're also the main crop-rating species. And there is a lot of this conflict going on. You say that they're not protected, the macaques, so there's absolutely no law against shooting them.
No, no law.
None.
No,
Okay.
no.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing, parallel, they say like the public perception that they're really common. That could be they're really common in areas where there's crops or where their people are, but outside of those areas, they're a lot less common. And that's something we find with some species here, that where they are, the people think that that species is really common, but when you take a wider view, they're actually one of the most threatened species. Camille, you've got your hand up now.
So for the Philippines, actually, I can only speak for because I'm in the city, and I just got involved just recently with Macaque work because some of us in our group in Community Tales, we volunteered to help out as a particular eco park, as I mentioned earlier. And so what I'm sharing is from my experience as a volunteer. Usually we have wildlife rescue centers here, but most of the rescue centers for macaques are in the provinces, so not actually in Manila. However, we have encountered several cases of people keeping macaques as pets. And even in the provinces, I attended I went on a tour in the Chocolate Hills, if you're familiar, in Bohol. And there was one of the tour stop was a mini zoo, and there were farm animals. And to my surprise, there was a macaque inside a small cage chained on the neck. So, and then when I inquired, one of the problems here is that the government, the implementation of, like, for example, we have several rules about confiscations and all, but it's all decentralized to the local government. So whatever rules we have in the central government, it differs between the local units in different areas all over the Philippines. So I think that's one of the main problems. That's what also discussed in one of the seminars created by the Bureau of Animal Industry, which we commended them because right now they're creating more seminars for the public. However, it was also mentioned that that's one of the problem because of the decentralization in the Philippines. That's really by law. What they do is from the central government, they just trickle it down, the whatever laws or regulations, and sometimes we get problems there in implementation. And as for the particular center that we are volunteering, it's called the PACEM Eco Park. It's a private eco park. It's actually inside the school, inside the Assumption Antipolo. So the board members are actually some alumni, sisters from the school. So when we volunteered, we actually became the animal welfare technical working group because there was no existing animal welfare group for that. So and then, as I mentioned, some of the animals there were actually given by the government. So even though there are rescue centers here, because maybe of the limited staff, funding, if they cannot handle the rescued animals, they sometimes give it to like privately funded foundations or NGOs, something like that. So, but the problem is that like for the eco park right now, they're not supported by the government. No one's supporting the eco park. It's just actually some of the parents of the students enrolled in the school. So it's kind of it's really a private so we are actually planning a fundraising, and even when we asked the reason why the reason for the government like giving the macaques out to the eco park, because the macaques has been there for like several years, and there has been different changes in the organization in the school and also in the staff. No one really knows the reason, so we don't really actually know the age of the animals there, where they came from, what the history is. So there's a lot of questions also, and we don't know if there's a contract between the school or between the park and the government. So I'm not sure maybe if you have any experience in that in your countries also there. But I think now I'm realizing that maybe we have to connect with the government. Maybe we have to ask them ourselves, so that we can get more answers to the questions. Thank you.
Thanks. That your comment about decentralization is something I didn't touch on my talk, but that's had a real effect in Peru. When was it? Starting in around 2009, but the process is still ongoing. The environmental powers used to be based in the capital, and then they separated it out to the regions. And it really, really depends on political will at the time, like whoever is governing that state for that period, about how effective the environmental authorities are, or how much interest the local politics has in these kind of things. And it's really like amazing. Neighboring states can be polar opposites of each other. And that's something also I'm getting from the different the information I'm getting from each of you. Depending on which country, it seems Vietnam has good government funding for rescue centers, whereas Indonesia, no. It's political will coming from the top is really, really key, I think. But in a minute, I'm gonna try and steer the discussion on to another point which could counteract that. But for now, Brooke has had her hand up. If you want to speak.
Can you hear me?
Indeed.
Okay, it's going back to something that Gunung said a few minutes ago, like, but it applies in all the different countries. We know that macaques, pigtail macaques, longtail macaques, particularly in Indonesia, don't have legal protection currently. We also know that a lot of researchers are starting to find, they suspect and are starting to confirm that their numbers are far, far, far smaller than they should be. And it seems likely over the coming few years that they will be like elevated, their conservation status will be elevated or lowered, however you want to put, basically made more endangered. They'll be recognized as being more threatened than they are.
Uplisted is the IUCN term.
Uplisted, thank you. So there's that happening, but at the same time, we do know that governments are fond of seeing them as overabundant and pest animals, and fond of culling them or rounding them up and shipping them away and all these things. And I'm just wondering, I was just curious to know whether in your different countries you think that the uplisting of long-tailed macaques, for example, would have an effect on how the government treats them. Do you think that would result in them being uplisted on your national lists? Or do you think it would be, unfortunately, still really convenient to keep them on the pest animal list instead? I hope that makes sense.
Is anyone? Gunung.
Yeah, I think in Indonesia is Indonesia is a large country, and we have so many rare species in Indonesia. And in North Sumatra, like Batang Toru ecosystem, an ecosystem in Tapanuli, we have more than 25 protected animals there, including tiger, orangutan, and some other important species, including critically endangered. So the macaque species is very low priority. Probably if I ask the government to put it as protected animal, or if I speak to some friends here, people probably laugh at me because so many other species that we have to handle. For example, like orangutan, we still not clear how to protect that for a long time. I don't see it so secure yet, although it gets so many attentions from around the world. So macaque is very low in our priority, and that's why I think it is very important to have a survey on the current populations of macaques in North Sumatra or in Indonesia, if possible, so that we know clearly the current situation and to avoid any surprise that it in the future becomes endangered species, for example. So we have to avoid them. And if there is any support in the future, in a foreseeable time, I would like to have the survey on the macaque population to start in North Sumatra, and if possible, I would like to have in the entire country. Indonesia is, a very large country. Maybe one country here is probably 10 to 20 countries in Europe in terms of the area. So, and also the species. It's a very rich country in terms of biodiversity.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have a comment? Jeremy.
Yeah, so our wildlife species list was actually just updated here in Laos this year, 2021. And all 5 macaque species were put under Category 1 for the national law here. I can't speak to whether that's changed anything.
Sorry, Jeremy. I'm just, for me, maybe for other people, Category 1 is equivalent of very endangered? Or
yes, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, Category 1 would be, I'd say the same as like CITES 1, Category 1, kind of same idea. And yeah, so that's the Category 1 for the Lao list is the most protected species that you can have in the country. I think the issue for us, well, I know the issue for us has to do with space, and I know that's not what this is about, but that does kind of coincide with confiscations and whether or not we have the capacity to take the animals into our center or not. Like I said, we have 100 macaques at the moment, and that's really pushing it for us. And so, yeah, that kind of plays a role. I'm interested to see, like Brooke mentioned, to see if there will be a bigger push in rescuing these animals because of the uplisting of them. But even with species in the past, we have animals like white-cheeked gibbon, pangolins, all of those kind of critically endangered and listed on Category 1 in the Lao law. We still don't find that there's the pressure to rescue them any quicker than any other animal. So, yeah.
Charlene?
Hey, thank you. Regarding our listing of the LTM status, right? 2020 became vulnerable, correct? So in Singapore, I think it does change the perception towards them, so there's a need to actually conserve and protect them. So in 2020, we actually have an update of our Wildlife Act. So macaques are protected species because they are obviously our native wildlife. So a person must not intentionally, so no trapping, no killing, no taking, and no keeping of long-tailed macaque in any place. Yeah, so if they are caught doing this, so for first-time offenders is I think fine up to 10K. Yeah. and perhaps a jail term of up to 6 months. Yeah. So in the past, we used to, or the government used to actually cull the macaques, but okay, we discovered that from what Sabrina said, it's not working, right? And especially if the root causes are not addressed. So now the government has shifted to no culling. So that is a very good sign. But unfortunately, so there's still trapping and relocation that's still carried out on occasion. So I think this might send out a wrong messaging to the residents. So for ACAS, trapping and relocation would be a last resort when all means have been exhausted. So we try to educate on how trapping and relocation is not a long-term solution, especially if root causes, like if there are still people feeding, or if there's still waste management issues there, other macaques, other wildlife are still going to be, going into the space. So there's still a gap to educate people and on changing perceptions.
Thank you. Shanee, when you say that they're now protected, you mean the legal status of the macaques changed recently?
No, they've always been protected.
Always been.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
And Jeremy, what was the justification in Laos for the change in their protected status?
Honestly, I am not sure. I know that they worked with IUCN representatives here in Laos, as I think that's the main other kind of body that they worked with, but it's completely part of the Ministry of Forestry that kind of made the decision on that. Yeah, I'm not sure the actual reasoning behind it.
Okay. Any other comments on this point or questions? You're also free to ask questions of yourselves, of other participants, if anyone wants to do that. Okay, something I mentioned before that I will come to now is we've been kind of focusing on problems with the authorities. They don't take it seriously. There's no funding, or there is funding, but then there's issues. There's always going to be issues. And what made me think of this was the comment about the decentralization from Camille. And it really depends on local political will, or between countries on national political will. But what we've found here as well is that it can come down to the individual, an individual authority who in their post is really willing to help or is really committed to the work can make a huge difference. Even if there isn't general political will or funding, if there's one dedicated individual or one dedicated group, it can really make a difference. There's not specifically that, but little things like that. Are there any real positives, key points that any of you could bring up from your experience that you think really help in, and it doesn't have to be in enforcing anti-hunting, it can be. It doesn't have to be in confiscations, it can be. To bring in the rescue centres or the education, maybe there's something in those fields that you can think of that is really key and can make a difference, even on a small scale, but that helps in the work immensely. Don't get shy now.
I can't raise my hand, so I feel a bit bad just yelling out. I'm sorry about that. I can't find the button for it. Is it all right just to go anyway without raising my hand? Like a bad student?
Go for it.
So one thing I must say I have found is that for a lot of work that is done in Vietnam, it is focused on higher levels and a workshop style of approach, and largely that doesn't work because you just find that there's problems all the way down the line. And so you can make the best laws in the world, you can work with all the directors you want, but unless the guy actually patrolling feels that he gets the attention, he gets a share of the work being done, then nothing changes. So in Vietnam, I find that working on with the FPD going to their confiscations or in the rescue centres is really the main way of affecting faster change. Everything else, like the long-term plans, seem to make changes, but over a really long period of time. And it's difficult to separate whether those changes are related to the work being done or whether they're just the growth of the economy here. And as people get more comfortable, they can afford the luxury of looking after the environment rather than being educated just to do it on their own basis. So that is one big thing I find about here. And then the work with that, it's not just about the work you are doing. Like if you work with the people on the ground every day, they have a problem that they encounter. But because in my sense, I've done this a lot in a lot of different places, there's a lot of different angles that I can help them to address problems with their work or even outside in their own lives, which help build relationships and then further work. And you end up creating the individuals you were speaking about, those individuals in government, because you've worked on the ground with them. As they get promoted, they know you already. They know who you are. They know what they stand for. And I find that that is invaluable. And I will have my little complaint, which is I think a lot of our NGOs were just creating NGOs to address loads of problems and talking with directors. But as for people actually working on the ground in these centres every day, you can count them on one hand.
That can work in the opposite direction. If you make a friend early on and they move up the ladder, as it were, that can be a great help. But if you make an enemy at some point and then they're the ones getting promoted, it can put a real spanner in the works.
I try not to make that many enemies, although I do.
Is there anyone else? As I said, it doesn't have to be the case of a specific person, but a specific action. Gunung, you have your hand up.
Yes. In Indonesia, it's always good to approach an officer at the government offices. And it's always helpful if there is an officer who really understands the situation. But there is also a challenge for that. If you provide information and raise the awareness of the officer, and it will take time, approach, meeting, probably you ask them to have lunch together and so on. After 1 or 2 years, the officer will move to other place, far away from our place. And then you will start again with a new officer. That's a perpetual situation here, including with other species too, such as orangutan. One example is that here we discuss about the extensions of our MOU with the government, and it was decided that the government agreed to extend our contract. And then the officer, the top management in provincial level moved to other places. And unfortunately, only 1 month after moving to other place, she passed away. So it's a kind of difficulty, but I'm sure we can work it out with the new officer. But what I want to tell is that we have frequent movement of government officers. So it's always good to approach an individual, but also we have to work institutionally. For example, like us, even the top management at provincial level already gone, but we already have a kind of meeting minute that the government already agreed to extend our work. And with that, we can continue our work.
Thanks. Dave, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Sam. I'm note taking, so I'm been a little bit quiet. But yeah, just on the issue of somebody mentioned the working groups. I can't remember if it was part of this workshop or as part of Sabrina's talk. But I just thought that was a really interesting point, having a working group which involved both the NGOs and the government representatives. And this might be something which would help us all to integrate our work and ourselves a little bit better with how the government sees the issues, because I think part of the problem from an NGO perspective, obviously, is that, you know, these issues become at the forefront for us to deal with. They're our number one, or, you know, in our top 3 or 4 issues that we're all trying to deal with. But for the government, they might be issue number 150 or 500, and maybe just getting that perspective from the government and being able to understand that a little bit better would be good for all of us, because while we might be really getting frustrated because we've got pressure from, you know, supporters or whoever that an issue is not being dealt with, and then we're just feeling that the government are doing nothing about it, when actually maybe the person we're talking to, you know, has 150 issues that he's dealing with, and we're the 151st. So I just thought, you know, it was an interesting one, that kind of idea of setting up these working groups so that everybody can kind of put things into perspective a little bit better, was a really good idea, and something that maybe, you know, we should be considering trying to do more of across the region to try to bridge that that gap with the government authorities that we're working with.
I do think that the AfA Coalition should help with our situation here in Indonesia. If we alone, we cannot make any change, but I believe if we work in a group under the AfA Coalition, the government will seriously listen it or consider it. So, yeah, and in our first year, we will focus on how to start operations of our rescue center. But in the second year, we are going to, you know, to start working with or communicate with the AfA coalitions and work together to make change. And we really want to have a regulation that will protect the macaques here, and because at the moment there is no regulation except one thing. We have a regulation issued by the Ministry of Environment and Forestry long ago, that if you transport animals from one place to another, it must be covered with a transport permit issued by the government. But that is very low in the hierarchy of our regulation in Indonesia, because it's if you violate that, well, mostly I would say 99% of the movement of the animals in Indonesia are without transport permit. And even if you violate that, you are not going to go to jail, because it's not a violation of criminal, it's a violation of administration. So it will be administrative violation, no punishment. So still a long way to have good protections for the macaques.
Anybody else? So I got a question for everyone. We've spoken quite a lot. People have brought in workshops, action plans. I can't remember the exact term. Work plans. Do these happen in your where you're based? Like I know here, for example, when they update the national endangered species list, it's not people in the government sitting in the government and drawing up a plan. They invite all, or not all, they invite the specialists of that country to sit down in a meeting and discuss it with the government, with their representatives, and then they decide on what species is going to be endangered. When there's a national action plan for a particular species, in this case it would be macaques, the government or an NGO would lead it hand in hand with the government and bring together the specialists in that species or in that geographical area. Like we have people here who might not be macaque specialists particularly, but they work in the area where macaques are found in general conservation. Do these things happen where you work? And if they don't, do you think it would be something that could move macaque conservation forward?
Well, in Indonesia, we have action plan for flagship species like orangutan, tiger, rhinoceros, and some others. But for macaque, of course, not yet. And when the Ministry of Environment and Forestry issue a list of protected animals, of course, they have experts who will help them in preparation of the list. And also they ask a kind of feedback from many NGOs. And unfortunately, macaques is did not get attentions yet, and probably because we have so many protected animals. It's a long list, and macaque is on a very low priority, and that's why we need to start the macaque conservation, and we will speak out in the future. In the past, yeah, I myself provide some input when I was with orangutan projects, but not with macaques yet. So we are going to mainstream the macaque protection in Indonesia in the near future. With the help of AfA, we really hope partnership or support from AfA Coalition. I'm sure that if it is articulated by an international group, the government will pay more attention instead of scorpion alone.
Okay, Dave, you've had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I think I just going to your question with regards the government consultations and the workshops, I think kind of goes to the point which Harry raised earlier, in that there's often high-level government meetings which will involve, various NGOs and directors of NGOs putting across, the points which obviously, are very valid in terms of trying to do wildlife conservation work. But I think that what it doesn't happen is the consultation doesn't always get down onto the ground with the people which are impacted by these issues enough. And I think that's something which does need to change. Now, I don't have so much experience with macaques, but we do have quite a lot of experience working on elephants and within Vietnam. And that's something which we are trying to do, in that we're trying to understand the issues with regard sort of elephant ownership and elephant usage from the people on the ground that are, you know, that are involved in these in these practices. And I think that is probably something that we could all do more of, as in much more consultation with the communities which are impacted if it's a macaque conflict issue, trying to understand it from their perspective a little bit more, and then trying to find solutions which work alongside the community. I'm sure it is happening, but I don't think it happens enough, whereas we often go to that higher level and talking to the government and maybe even, you know, blaming the government for not addressing the issue, when actually, you know, maybe we need to support the government to do more work at the local level so that we can try to tackle some of these issues. And then if we can find a solution for one, then maybe we can replicate it in other areas.
Yeah, this just gonna add a point here where the Colombian branch, not myself, but the Colombian branch of our NGO 2 years ago were in charge of doing the national action plan for the brown-headed spider monkey, the Colombian black spider monkey subspecies in Colombia. And I'm generally in agreement with Harold that there's lots of action plans and there's lots of great laws that don't get applied. But in this case, like, we're not a CI or a WWF or a WCS, we're not a huge NGO that gets to speak to ministers and prime ministers or presidents much. But in this action plan, we didn't just invite the NGOs, the researchers, the government offices. We also invited representatives of the indigenous coalitions, the Afro-descendant community coalitions, and so on, to participate in the design of the plan. It's only been 2 years, and most of those 2 years have been under pandemic conditions. The application of the plan hasn't really started yet, but I think that if it's done in the right way, including the on the ground of people, the real stakeholders, as you say, I think these kind of plans can have an impact. Just having a plan in existence won't do much. But if you can design it right and actually get it applied, it could, I think, make a difference. Charlene, you've had your hand up for a while, sorry.
Sorry, thank you. In Singapore, we do have action plans for species that are more urgent in need of protection or conservation, so like the Sunda pangolin and also your Raffles banded langur. So in terms of consultation for changing bills, changing laws, it used to be a closed group, but now so the governments are opening up to listening to feedback. So they started from nature groups. So there has been a recent workshop with nature groups on our endangered species import and export bill. Yeah, so they also get the public to write in their opinions. But we have to understand that so not all people or the public will actually care about the issues, right? Because of the negative perceptions of macaques sometimes. We want to write in. So I think that what would help that if there are public consultations, that perhaps nature groups can talk about the bill to make it simpler, or why people should care about the issues, and maybe provide clips to write in effectively.
Fiolita?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Just want to add a little bit about the condition in Indonesia. Actually, we have so many regulations here, and also want to bit clarify about what Pak Gunung said regarding the air rifle, or is it allowed or not to like shoot the animal. Actually, in Indonesia, we have the regulation that people can hunt the animals by the gun or a rifle or whatever it is. But only in some area which allowed by the government. But normally people like shoot or hunting the macaques, long-tail macaques, in places that which is not allowed by the government. So it's like misconception of the regulation itself. And also regarding about the plan, what I identified in Indonesia is mostly the animal protection NGO is not like working together with the environment NGO. Mostly they work by themselves, not like collaborate, and not like doing workshop together with the government institution and also the environmental NGO. So, and also the NGO to protect the indigenous people, because normally it is like connected each other, but they mostly like working alone. And also the another problem is when it comes to workshop like held by the NGO or the government, they forget to include the law enforcers, like the policemen, the prosecutors or the judge, because what I know, when any animal crime being processed by the court, for example, like the police want to tackle the report by the people, and they process it and take over to the prosecutors. But then when the prosecutors and the judge doesn't really understand about the issue, or even they don't understand about what is the animal welfare should be fulfilled by people who like keep wildlife as a pet or anything related to wildlife or macaques, they don't really understand. So mostly they give like low punishment to them because they lack of understanding about the wildlife issue. Yeah, I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. That's something that definitely happens here. There are really, really low prosecution rates. It wasn't actually until about 4 or 5 years ago that anyone in Peru ever received a jail sentence for any kind of animal trafficking crime. And since then, it's only, I think, about 7 people. I'm not saying that is the solution, but it is an example of how the authorities, in many cases, judges, as you mentioned, prosecutors, don't take it seriously. But that's a reflection of a general misunderstanding that you also mentioned, where a misunderstanding of the law, no? What species are protected, what species are not protected, what is an administrative crime, what is a whatever the other kind of crime, I forgot the term. And so a few people have mentioned like doing education to change public perception, but as we're on working with authorities focused workshop here or section, in our work we've done, all right, Harold's got his hand up. I'll let him speak first.
Sorry, just before you moved on, I wanted to add a little bit into that. And I think it's a lot of what Dave said and the previous lady about people having different priorities and issues. So in Vietnam, even if the animal wildlife crime is taken very seriously with the prosecution, the main focus of Vietnam now is development and ending poverty. So if someone in an impoverished situation is caught with a monkey, they're less likely to receive, and this is slightly generalized, but they're less likely to receive a prosecution because there's an awareness from the authorities that they're just perpetuating poverty, which is the goal to end for government. So we get better help or collaboration when we take in poverty reduction into our new measures of how we intend to conserve wildlife. And linking those two things is very helpful. Like, you're not going to close down a bird market in Vietnam that generates $30 million of illegal trade. It might be illegal, but that's still $30 million worth of trade for impoverished people. And I know that that's normally at the higher level of the people making that money, but it does filter down. So I just wanted to add that because we hit on a few issues that were similar.
Thanks. That's something that we definitely get feedback from the authorities here, where like a case is reported of a single animal as a pet or a small market stall, and they won't generally, they'll just write it in the paperwork as they found the animal. They won't pursue prosecution against it. But
a classic.
We've also got cases, clear-cut cases, where we have video footage of someone selling and offering many kinds of endangered species, and they're not a poor, impoverished market stall holder in a rural area, and they're still given the minimum legal punishment because it's not seen as a serious threat to the environment or the species in this case, even with the evidence presented. So there are still issues of misunderstanding. I think Gunung has his hand up.
Yeah, regarding law enforcement against the wildlife criminals. Well, we had many discussion here in Sumatra about the situations of the law enforcement. But one interesting statement by a police officer in one meeting, it was still clear in my mind. He said there is a traditional perception here in Indonesia that human has higher status than animals, and therefore people like judge, for example, feel so bad if he or she give penalty or send people to prison just because of killing a bird. But our law says if the bird is protected and you kill it or you capture it, sell it, and so on, you will get a maximum of 5 years in jail plus a fine of 100 million rupees or $70 US. The law says so, but people still feel unhappy to give the punishment for human just for killing a bear, a protected bear. So this is a kind of traditional perception that I think we should change. Thank you.
I think that's not just limited to Indonesia. Someone put in the chat anthropocentric point of view, and I think that's a worldwide innate thing in everybody, pretty much. Okay, we're getting into the last 30 minutes of the discussion time, and now, following my instructions, I'm supposed to steer the discussion. I'll actually read this to you because it says it better than I'll be able to paraphrase. Steer the discussion towards honing in on outcomes, actions that can be taken by groups looking to do similar work, by the coalition as a whole or by individuals. So if from what we've discussed, or any new points, but let's try not to get new discussions started, are there any action points that anyone wants to bring up or suggest? Maybe we've already had a couple where the coalition could help with Gunung in Indonesia to put get recognition for the possible actual threatened status of the macaques, things like that. Gunung, you have your hand up. I don't know if it's still up from last time or you put it up again. No, okay. So anyone have any ideas of what's next? Anyone know how to save the macaques? Brooke, you have your hand up, or are you just waving or something?
Oh, I chose the wrong thing. It meant to be my hand up. Looks like I'm waving, but basically, I just wanted to say that this isn't an outcome from this meeting, but there are some good things going on currently. So for example, there is the Long-tailed Macaque project, which is a really interesting range-wide plan. They've got people in most range countries currently ready to take countrywide surveys of long-tailed macaques specifically. And I think from some of the countries, findings are starting to come in. But so they have like a long-term plan for uplisting the long-tailed macaque, which they're pretty sure that that's going to be necessary, and for trying to work with governments and stuff like that to try to get better protection nationally. It's a long-term plan. It's not going to, it would be nice to have something that works a little bit more quickly, but it's one positive anyway.
Just going back to this uplisting thing, comment to Gunung and in general, the perception, the public or even government perception that macaques are not endangered should not be a complete like negative or an impediment to them being listed as a threatened species if the data is available. All of these lists are made based on certain cut-off points. If you have a certain amount of habitat lost in a certain number of years or generations, a certain population reduction, if you can show that in numbers, it doesn't matter how many other species the government or whatever institution has on its endangered species list, that species then qualifies, in this case, one of the macaque species, as an endangered species. So the public or the perception of them as being abundant shouldn't prohibit them being on the on a threatened species list. Harold, actually typing.
Sorry.
So yeah, you've now met each other, it seems, for the first time in most cases. A lot of what you're saying seems to be mirrored between countries, between experiences, as well as over here, which to be honest doesn't surprise me. I've worked in quite a few countries in Latin America, and also years ago spent time in Asia, and a lot of my experiences are very similar. So I think there's a really good good opportunities for coordination within the coalition. Does someone want to suggest ways where you think the coalition could move forward in respect to working with authorities? Dave, you put your hand up.
Yeah, I just thought, because I was making notes, I'd just say what I put down so far as outcomes from the discussion that we had just might be useful. So I put down obviously a need for more population data determining status, particularly with perception of many species being common due to the interactions. I'd also put down this need for us to educate the public on the protected status, but also on the value of biodiversity, which comes to the point which Gunung had made earlier about people not really maybe respecting wildlife, or it not being seen to be a major problem if somebody harms or confiscates wildlife. And then the need for us to focus on the people on the ground, such as the rangers and the caretakers that are working with animals a little bit more, more so than maybe at the higher level, where we maybe sometimes concentrate our efforts. And then with regard sort of working groups, obviously this need to develop much more NGO government working groups at a local level to help us to bridge those gaps and understand each other a little bit better, and so manage expectations between both the NGOs and the work and the government, which we talked about earlier. And then also to have these working groups with the local community involved as well, to try to understand it from the local community perspective. And so hopefully then, you know, will give us a little bit better idea of how we can address things that work for the local community as well as for wildlife. So that was just I thought it might be useful to just to summarize what I've taken away so far from the discussion that we've had.
That certainly sounds good to me. I'm definitely not a firm believer in trickle-down economics or conservation or anything. I think you do need to work at all levels, including the top, but the most useful action, especially in the short term, is at the local level or the regional level. Something which we haven't really touched upon, like education of public has been mentioned, but education of the authorities is being hinted at, education training, we can call it, to make sure that the rangers, the police, the prosecutor, the judge, all the different authorities involved are fully aware and fully understand the law. Like we've done training sessions here for the various authorities. And like you ask a question, what species are endangered, and they don't know. And these are the people who are supposed to be enforcing the laws. We made these ID booklets because we were getting shipped animals from other parts of Peru that said it's a woolly monkey on the box, and they weigh 15 kilos. And we open the box and there's a squirrel monkey which weighs like 500 grams. Like amazingly, what seemed to us obvious mistakes, but that's because the thought hasn't been put into training these people by the people who should be thinking of this, which is the higher levels of government, the higher levels of the authorities. But if they're not going to do it, it falls to the NGOs or the local grassroots movements or training themselves. Brooke, you've got your hand up.
Yes, hi. You've just reminded me of this as well. We were talking about hotlines and stuff like this. A few people, I think, mentioned having hotlines. And I wanted to say, actually, from an NPC perspective, Denuncia Fauna wasn't, I think it wasn't like a telephone hotline, you know, but it was an email address. It was a contact thing. And that doesn't require massive budget. That was not a high budget operation. So I just want, that's like a nice, I don't know if you can talk just a little bit about how you, like the logistics of operating that on a pretty much nothing budget, because it's possible, as we know from experience.
Yeah, that was literally setting up an email account called denunciafauna@gmail.com. Wasn't even an institutional address. And then we put little infographics up on our Facebook and asked our friends from other groups to share that on their social media and on Twitter or whatever. Also, we printed off a run of A2 posters and put them up at key points over a couple of states, like bus stations and transport hubs, so that people could see it. And then people would just write and say, hey, I've seen this animal here. And obviously that's not good enough to do an actual, an official complaint. You need to have the species, you need to have the address, you need to have as much detailed information as possible. But the only cost really, other than printing those posters, was the transport from the village we lived in to the nearest slightly larger town where there was an office of the public prosecutor. And because, although there's been this process of decentralization, things like the prosecutor's office are still national. So anyone can make an official complaint, not just environmental, about anything, to the prosecutor anywhere in the country, and it will be rerouted to the respective office in the area where the crime or the event has taken place. I don't know if that's applicable in all the cases here. One point since then, Brooke, is that the government, I don't know if they copied us, but they quite not that long ago set up an email address called Alerta Surfor. Surfor is Servicio Forestal, Forestry Service, where you're supposed to do exactly what we were asking people to do, where you send your information. But because that is, you know, you don't leave your contact address or whatever, and because you do it through some kind of huge institutional switchboard, it's untraceable. So where we could make a complaint and then go back 2 months later and ask what happened. Did anyone follow up on this? Going through the official government channel, it's a huge, long process of what is it, a right of access to information kind of legal procedure to be able to trace whatever action may have happened. So there's not actually an end point to this story, but it's definitely something that isn't hard to do and has very demonstrable outcomes. Would that be possible? Is that, like, Brooke, you brought it up, maybe it's something you're thinking of or you're hoping someone else is thinking of?
I was just kind of raising it as a few people have mentioned it, and I think there could be, I just think it's a nice option for groups, even if they don't, even if they're not heavily resourced. That's all.
Is it something though where you would recommend it for, because in Vietnam we have one group that set one up and we all advertise their hotline, because if we ended up with 4 hotlines, you would end up with just the authorities getting contacted by 4 different people, and they might get repetition of the same case. And also you just wouldn't have that data centralized, I suppose. It would be held by lots of different people. So I don't know the answer.
Yeah,
that's a very good point.
It also depends on what you aim to get out of it. If you aim to evaluate the authorities' responses, then you definitely want a centralized database. If you aim to get action taken to rescue that animal or to shut down that illegal zoo or whatever, then maybe more complaints from different people is better, so it could help. It depends on what you want to get out of it. But this, something which occurred to me while we were talking about this, and someone brought up earlier, the fact that environmental and animal NGOs don't want to work together. I think that was in Indonesia. I remember Indonesia when I was there many years ago as having millions of NGOs that never spoke to each other. So that's another thing, like, if your intention of setting up something like that denuncia fauna is to get the animals rescued, then yes, it's very effective, I think. Because even though there were very low prosecutions, there were a lot of rescues and seizures. So it comes back to the thing again where the authorities don't want to apply the punishments on, you know, poor local people who wouldn't have the resources to pay the fines or whatever. But if your aim is to try and really, like, change the situation for macaques across the region or across an entire country, it can bring attention to the issue, but I'm not sure it will make a long-term change that some of the other ideas we've discussed here, like properly networking, bringing together the authorities with the people on the ground, getting proper recognition of the actual states of the species and so on. I think these may be more effective on the large scale. Camille, you have your hand up.
Hi, sorry, my internet is acting. This is actually more of a question to everyone. I actually don't know anyone here, so I was just invited by the one who trained us in animal welfare, by a veterinarian, so she invited me here. In terms of the education, I think you all mentioned the education, and someone mentioned before the anthropomorphism. It reminded me of, if I may just share, for our dog visits, usually because I mentioned we train handlers, and then we also approach schools if they want a dog therapy program for their students. So usually, no matter how much we explain the human-animal bond, what we have experienced is that they will not really buy into it unless they experience it for themselves. So when we did we suggested, okay, let's do an initial visit, and then when they see the faces of the kids, and then when the kids tell their parents, so automatically the whole school and the parents community, they buy into the program. So I was just wondering how it could apply to macaques in wild animals. Like how can we, of course, I'm sure everyone here is passionate on conservation, wild animals, but not everyone likes macaques or other wild animals. And then some of them see them as pests or harmful to humans, to society. So in terms of education, like, for those who are handling rescue centers, do you partner like with schools, or what kind of education programs do you find to be effective to kind of raise the emotion and raise the empathy for animals and for nature?
Thanks, Camille. We only have a few minutes left, so if anyone has an answer for Camille, please go ahead, keep it short, and then Charlene will get to you afterwards, unless it's directly related to what Camille was saying. So any of the rescue center people here have an answer? I guess not, Camille.
Camille, Camille, your question was whether we work together with institutions, is it? Yeah,
what kind of educational institution work together now with the rescue centers?
Or what kind? Is it? Or that's the
Yes, like how do you partner with, for example, schools so that they can visit the center or something like that?
Oh, okay, I can answer that. So for us, right, we have an education team. So we can talk about many issues: humane education, illegal wildlife trade, native wildlife. So we will engage schools of different ages, from kindergarten all the way up to even adults. Yeah, and then sometimes we also have open houses, so where we'll invite people to come in, and then we'll show them around the compound to talk about the issues pertaining to the animals that are housed there. So we have animals from illegal wildlife trade that are housed here, and also the animals that are injured. So a lot of them, we have birds that are can talk about issues like glue traps. Yeah, that's one of them, and also poisoning. Yeah.
Thank you.
And Charlene, you had your hand up before. Did you have another point to mention?
Yeah, it was what Brooke was asking, so about the hotline kind of thing. So we have a 24-hour, so we call it a helpline, because we think hotline is not a very good term to use. Also, it depends on the purpose of the thing you want to call it. So if you call it a hotline, means people will expect a response and intervention. So sometimes that might not be very good. So helpline means that you can talk to a person, give advice, maybe a more neutral kind of term. So for our helpline, we have a 24-hour hotline. Is we spend about $200 per month, but also quite we need to have someone to have. We have a response team to tap to it. Yeah. So for our rescue helpline, it's always 2 person in the team. Yeah. So they have shifts.
Thanks. Cook.
Okay, hello. In the past, many years ago, I worked in a government rescue center. So every year, many students came to the rescue center to visit this rescue center by some education team from the national park. Yeah, they invited many students and teachers to come to educate about the wildlife. And I think when people when the staff in the rescue center aimed to educate people that how why animals be stressed in the cage, how they stress in the cage, or maybe calf. maybe in the small cage, or just living in the cage without any material like enrichment for many things. That makes them stressed. I think is a good way to educate students. In the past, I even educate to the student in the rescue center, maybe in Hoàng Liên National Park in somewhere in the north of Vietnam. When the students see the macaque in the cage, they just see, oh, how much how macaque beautiful. Just and I say, no, it's not. Yeah, the macaque is beautiful, but is not happy in the small cage. It's just very suffering in the small cage. They need to be live in the wild. I think it's a good way to educate students. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other points? We're getting towards the almost to the okay. Brooker's just contacted me. Yeah, we're gonna wrap this up now. We're gonna do a quick summary of what I think have been the main points, but Dave did a really good job of that about 5 minutes ago. But it seems to me the general thing across a lot of the areas is that, yes, there is a problem with macaques, or for macaques, I should say. And that's generally not perceived by the public or by the authorities in most cases. It's not seen as a problem, other than the macaques are a problem as being pests in some cases, but the idea of them being an endangered species or a threatened species is not taken seriously. And also that there's a disconnect, which this may stem from, between government and NGOs in quite a few cases. There are obviously cases like in Laos, where yes, they are a threatened species, or in Vietnam, where yes, the government funds the rescue centers. But generally, it seems that to me, these are the kind of overlying threads. And in terms of what can be done about that, I think what we've kind of covered is that you, the coalition, could concentrate on getting the information needed to be able to justify to the different governments the uplisting of macaques, or some of the species at least, to threatened categories to increase their legal protection, while also trying to work together between the rescue centers, the NGOs, the educational institutions and the authorities, to try and change the public perception and the authorities' perception of the issue, which becoming a threatened species will only go so far if people don't understand why. That's kind of what I've seen as the main points to take out of it. I don't know if anyone wants to mention something, if they think I've missed it or that was very important to them, or Dave, if in your notes you have something subsequent to your last recap.
No, I think that pretty much covers everything that I've got. Yeah, I just mentioned on top of those outcomes, the ideas of education and training at the authority level, which you mentioned towards the end there, to understanding of laws and particularly species identification issues. And yeah, the consideration of these hotlines or helplines, or at least contact points, being useful either from an NGO or an authority level as well. So I've just added those to the other outcomes.
Yeah, that contact points one, that was one of the major comments that we got from the people who contacted us. We asked, why did you contact us? And the most common response was they didn't know who else to contact. So yeah, I think unless anyone has any final points, I think we wrap this session up now. And it's been really, really great to meet you all. It's been great to travel again since COVID. I haven't been out of Peru, and now I've been in Indonesia and Singapore and Malaysia and everywhere. And yeah, I'm not gonna be around for the rest of the thing because it's very early in the morning now, and I'm gonna have kids waking up very soon. So good luck with the rest of it, and I'm sure Brooke will keep me up to date with how the coalition comes along, and I'm happy to be involved again further down the line. And thank you for not making me cut any of you off for over speaking or misbehaving.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Sam.
That was really good. Everybody, if you look down at the sort of bottom right of your screen, there's a thing that says leave room. If you press that, it'll bring you back to the main room. We'll just all say hello, talk about the break, and then take a break. Thank you, Sam. Bye, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye,
Brooke. Thank you all again. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you, Sam, and bye, everyone.
Just wait till everybody arrives before I talk. Okay, well, for those of you who are here now, people might have just taken off and gone on the break already, which is fine. Although I don't know whether Harry's group is here yet, so I'm gonna check. Yeah, Harry's group is still in session. They're leaving now, but in case people just want to get on with their break, we're going to have an hour's break now. And then at, I think it's 1:45 p.m. Hanoi time. It is 2:45 Singapore Sulawesi time. We will reconvene. And at that point, we will have the two sessions, legislation with Tang will be in the forest room. Monkey guarding with Sabrina will be in the urban room. You just want to use the same link to you know, come back to the same meeting if you leave, or you can just leave it on mute and pause, stop recording or whatever and take a break. So see everybody in a little while. Have a lunch or something. Thanks.
See you later.
Brooke, are you still there?
I'm still here.
And I don't know if Harry's still here. I can't see, but yeah, really wonderful workshop. In Harry's one, amazing moderator.
Great.
So yeah, I've sent the link to Harry just to say that there's the outcomes document just being put together by us and the note takers just now. I don't know if you sent the same to Sam.
I did. Sam isn't going to join us because it's well past midnight and he's got small children waking up in a few hours. But I think I may have managed to record the workshop session with Sam, which I didn't think was possible. And I think we may have done the same with Harry's.
Yeah, I think Ian recorded Harry's, so that's good.
Great. So as long as that happened, when we send out the links to the talks, we'll also send out the links to the workshops.
And I might have missed it when we came back through, but there was some conversation in our workshop about the Slack Macaque Coalition, and we'll invite everyone to that after the event. And also exchanging contact details, because we have our internal directory and our public directory as well. So it might be worth mentioning, because there's people you know, exchanging documents. So if we can connect them after the event.
Just to fill in on what Sarah said, we have next week, I'm going to be sending out an email to everybody who participated, and it will include information about how to get your information in our directory. We've got both a public one that goes on the website and a private one that will just go to people involved in the event. And the Slack that Sarah is talking about is kind of like an improvement upon a discussion forum. A lot of people might use Slack anyway, but it's just a place where we can all join this channel and have relevant conversations about whatever comes up. So it will be great to have you there. And also resources wise, I do, you know, part of what we need to do is continue to collect various resources and make them available via our website. So I'll send you information about providing various sorts of resources in the same email next week. And for those of you who weren't here when we said it, we're going to reconvene in an hour's time, which is 1:45 p.m. Jakarta time, Hanoi time. And we will have Tang's session on legislation in the forest room and Sabrina's session on monkey guarding in the urban room. Now have a nice break. Bye.